So, welcome to Leaders in Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Nick Carman, and I hope this proves to be the mentor in your pocket for future leaders of real estate investment and development. Now, we're going to talk about the challenges, the obstacles, and the benefits of leadership with the aid of our mentor's own experience. So, Stephanie Lynch, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nick. Great to talk to you today.
Thank you very much. Now, to those who don't know Stephanie, Stephanie is the Chief Investment Officer and Chief Financial Officer for Student Quarters. She's responsible for the firm's investment and capital raising strategies. And over the course of her career, she's executed over $4.5 billion of debt and equity from domestic and offshore sources. Those are some big numbers. So I look forward to breaking this down, Stephanie. So to get us started, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about what you're responsible for today?
Sure. Well, today with Student Quarters, I'm the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Investment Officer. I essentially guide all of the fundraising strategy and investment deployment for the firm, as well as oversee corporate strategy and all of the fundraising and deployment around any of the corporate businesses that we are investing in.
So let's wind the clock back, Stephanie. Let's talk about the first time you were given leadership responsibility.
So early leadership responsibility, it was with analyst teams in real estate. It was trying to communicate what we needed to do, the timelines we needed to do it in. And it was definitely sort of thrown into the deep end without a lot of coaching necessarily early on, which makes it a bit of a trial and error sort of way to learn how to do that.
I'm interested. Did you feel ready?
At the time, no, but in retrospect, absolutely was ready and, very quickly can rise to the occasion or did rise to the occasion and found that, if you can be a good communicator and keep an eye on timelines and priorities and communicate that to other folks, you can, get to the end goal. Particularly early on in my career, it was very much a transaction environment exclusively. It was always about what client do we have, what are their capital needs, and how do we get those deals closed. And so the sense of purpose was pretty simple in a lot of ways. And so it was just a matter of helping to make sure everyone was aligned in those goals and kind of working towards the same thing and delivering the same messages around that.
What drove you in those days, do you think?
Uh, Certainly some fear, not fear of failure, not wanting to fail. And I think, in real estate, we all have those experiences where transactions don't close the way we want them to or aren't working out the way we want them to. One of the things I have certainly realized over time is however I envision a transaction or a strategy ought to go, it's probably not going to go exactly that way. And there's lots of ways to think about success through that. But you've got to be flexible and got to be willing to, pivot when the circumstances change.
Interesting. Now, one of the things I've promised our audience is to break out a little bit of our mentors' toolkit, the skills that they've honed. So I'd just like to dive into a little bit that sort of that fear of failure, because I bet lots of our audience could have had or will be feeling something very, very similar. How did you overcome it?
Early on, it was really a matter of understanding that we're going to not always get what we what we want or what we ask for in the business, and it is actually a failure to not ask for the things that we want and things that we need or things that our clients or our firm needs. And so it's not about someone saying no or not getting exactly what you ask for. It's about not trying to optimize an individual situation that is really problematic. And so once you can get rid of that fear of somebody saying no, of someone saying, well, I don't want to do that, you can open it up to, well, what what would a better solution look like? Where do we get to the right goal? Where do we get to an acquisition closing, a new investment, a new strategy for the firm? How do we get there? And being really able to listen to what the objections or concerns are and being really thoughtful about the risks. And then again, you know, just because someone says no, that isn't failure. You got to get over that and just move past that and be willing to sort of see that at the end of the day, there's a bigger strategy here and keep moving towards that.
Interesting. Next question I wanted to ask is, how have the leaders that you've been around, how have they shaped your own leadership styles? What have you taken from them as to how you lead people?
Yeah, certainly over time, different things from different partners and mentors and clients. A couple of things that I can think of in particular. I had a boss early on in the business who really was incredibly persistent, and no matter what obstacle seemed to be put in the way, was willing to have the fortitude to continue through and say, all right, how do we fix this? How do we solve this? Be really innovative and creative about it, but that those dual traits of incredible amount of persistence and an incredible amount of creativity have been really helpful to me in my career over time. And I think those are some of the most valuable things that I have taken from that. I would say one of the other things, with certain partners I've had, I've really learned that being a good communicator is so important, and the ability to get comfortable around having difficult conversations has been really important to me as a leader. Those can be difficult conversations around a strategy, around individual feedback. It can be around a whole host of things, but to be a good communicator and deliver complicated and difficult messages in a way that people are receptive to them and willing to work with you, and not become defensive or shut down or say, well, that's too hard or too complicated. To be able to continue those conversations. And again, it's really around being able to drill into whatever those difficult issues are and saying, let's get creative and find a solution there.
Okay. Now, in prep for our conversation, I got to talk to a couple of people who've known you pretty well, and I asked them, "What's Steph great at?" And I've got. The great thing is this: I got lots, but there's a few here that I wanted to pick out from it, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time just sort of diving into. And this is very similar to one of the questions I asked earlier, but I'd like to go a bit deeper this time. So, Steph outworks and outsmarts her peers was one of the first answers I got, and I think that comes back down to drive, right? So, why do you work harder? Yeah. How do you uh, navigate better than your peers? What have you got that other people haven't?
I'm not sure why I work harder. I will say before I got into real estate, and I didn't know that real estate was going to be where my career was going to end up. I had studied music from a very young age and studied piano, and I had some very inspirational piano teachers, uh, one all the way through high school, and then another really inspirational teacher in college. And when you're studying music, there's always an opportunity to be a little bit better, to play it a piece better, faster, more nuanced, more precise, more emotional, more whatever. And that drive it comes, I think it's been practiced through that experience of, there's always an opportunity to improve. And it I don't want to say that it's never good enough, because that's not quite the right, not the right perspective to take away, but there's always improvement that's available to us in anything. And I'm just intrinsically motivated to sort of find where that might be, and to keep working at it. And there's, great reward when you keep working at something, you actually do get better at it, whether that's music or sports or your career or whatever. So there's a good feedback loop there that, I guess, is part of what drives me.
Okay. Another bit of our research threw up, I thought, something really interesting that I wanted to ask you about. And this was during your very first week at student quarters.
Ugh.
Now, I was told that 4 days into your new role, SQ, your corporate partner back in Australia had hit the wall, and student quarters needed to think fast. And I was told this would not have happened without you, which is quite a statement again, given how short your tenure had been. And they finished their sort of anecdote off by explaining that Steph is a tremendous negotiator, and as a consequence, we came at that position stronger. So let's wind the clock back a little bit. Let's think then about that scenario. How did you respond? How did you react? This is a very different climate, different team, different business, possibly different challenge than you've faced before. How did you come out with such a positive result?
Yeah, it was really an incredible shock. I had started. I thought I had done all of my background and due diligence on this firm. It was on student quarters and their corporate partner back in Australia. And uh, shortly after I started, within a couple of days after starting, there was a scandal at the Australian firm. Had nothing to do with student quarters or, quite frankly, any of their US based businesses, but it became a very serious scenario very quickly. And all of a sudden, instead of me being hired to do something that I had lots of experience doing, I was asked to bring in institutional LP partners for student housing deals. I had done that not for student housing, but I had done that for lots of other real estate strategies. I knew all the right players. I actually was starting this job thinking, oh, this is a great place to be. I couldn't be more lucky. How stable is this going to be? This is something that I can do. And then I'm immediately hit with, no, we have to recapitalize the whole company. And it was very much a surprise and a requirement that we sort of start from scratch. And whatever I thought I was going to be doing, this new role was going to be put off for a few months until we understood what exactly this change meant for student quarters, and had to figure out how to extract ourselves from it. I will
Did it?
say, oh,
Did you ever think about? I mean, 4 days in, you haven't got much skin in the game at this point, Steph. Did you
I did.
did you think about throwing in the
I thought
towel?
about quitting and going back to my old job. I did.
Yeah.
But I had left my prior role for a reason, and I had left it because I didn't see myself spending the rest of my career there. And I thought, I've already said goodbye to that. I've already said that's not where I want to be. What's the worst that happens? Right? Like we'll probably
Well, it sounds like
figure
it
it out. And
happened,
if
right?
it sort of did happen. But I thought, well, you know what? We'll figure it out. And I actually did give myself 12 months, and I thought, and sat with my husband and talked about it. We said, all right, 12 months, we'll see how this works. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, we'll go do something else. But I, I never really thought that it wouldn't work out during the financial crisis. And that was, really a quite difficult time for a lot of folks in real estate. I was working at JLL at the time, and we pivoted from raising capital for developers to helping both developers as well as investors get through their workouts and distressed assets. And I had spent a lot of time from essentially 2008 until 2011 or so digging deep into what's the source of the distress, what does the capital stack look like, what are the governance rights that each party has, who's in control, who can make these decisions, and how do we get to an answer that preserves as much value for, quite frankly, whomever my client was at the time, whether that was the developer and GP or whether that was the LP or, quite frankly, the senior lender, because we were advising on lots of different transaction types and with lots of different clients. That experience made me think, all right, well, it's pretty applicable here, right? We've got to figure out what the governance rights are, who's going to be able to make some decisions. And it became an opportunity for student quarters to say, all right, we thought the next 3 to 5 years were going to look like X, and instead the next 3 to 5 years are going to look like Z. And let's go find a partner who's going to help us do that. And it was a lot of quickly trying to understand what the company could do and where we were and what we needed, and try to match that up with investors who had the same vision for participating in an operating company platform investment as well as the deal level investments. And it was a great opportunity to talk to a lot of folks. There was definitely some false starts in that process where we spent time with certain investors only to discover that wasn't going to happen wasn't going to work out the way we thought it might, but ultimately ended up with a great partner who really understood student quarters, understood the leadership team and what we were trying to accomplish, and really helped us build student quarters into that next vision of what we wanted to be.
The last part of that research mentioned about your spectacular negotiating skills. And again, I want our audience to benefit. Do you have a way of looking at negotiating? Do you have a template or a way of approaching these discussions?
The approach is very much situation specific, for sure. I think it starts with what are the goals of each party? What are the pressure points of each party involved? And what would a great outcome look like? And how much, leverage or pain is each party willing to accept as you go through that? I'm not sure I have any special sauce there other than I am a good communicator. I am happy to get into that conversation very directly and try to sort through what those answers are that people are looking for. I think part of it too is to be creative and throw out different solutions. When one party says I need A and the other one says I need B, you know, you can't just sit there and keep having the same conversation over and over again. You've got to float some different ideas and get creative and be a little bit more innovative about, well, what could be a solution here? And maybe that borrows from something we've done in the past or something someone else in the industry has done that we are aware of. And maybe it's something new, and you just have to keep having that open line of communication and keep pushing forward. And again, I'll come back to the beginning, being really persistent. And I think that was something I learned from, an early boss, was to be really, really persistent and creative as you approach these things. And more often than not, you'll get to a really good outcome.
Okay. We've talked about a lot of the successes. Mistakes happen, right? Mistakes happen in everyone's career. So,
Yeah.
are there any mistakes that haunt you? What were some of the biggest mistakes or biggest lessons you've learned from these?
Yeah, you're learning all the time, and even having, been in my career for 25 years, I am learning all the time new lessons. I think early on, though, the hardest lesson was working with a client. I was an advisor raising capital for them. They had a pretty interesting strategy around mixed use development as well as recapitalization of some existing stuff. And I had brought some potential investors to the table. And I, I knew that there was some pressure points and I had tried to communicate those. And I'm not sure that my client at the time heard heard the risk heard the risks and heard those pressure points, and ultimately made some decisions and blew it up, and that would have been transformative for them. It would have been transformative for my career had I closed that as well. And so I look back at that and I think, gosh, maybe I should have been a little bit more direct in my communication. Maybe I should have been a little bit more forceful in how I was presenting the risks in terms of, if you change the deal this way, it's going to have, I believe it will have these negative outcomes. And I think that's led me to be very vocal about what I think the right strategies are. And ultimately, right, I don't get to make every decision. There's other parties involved, but everyone's going to know exactly where I stand and why, because I do feel like that was one example of, again, a very important transaction for me and for the client, that I thought I had communicated well enough what was going to happen if there were certain changes made, and they didn't seem to internalize or really accept that that was the case. And I don't want anyone to ever say, oh well, Stephanie didn't explain it well enough, or I'm not sure what Stephanie was really thinking. No one ever says that anymore. People know what I'm thinking now.
Right, let's move on into the next chapter of our conversation. This is the point where I want our audience to feel like they are sat in the room with you and really benefiting now from some of your mentorship. Let's think about, when you're thinking about future leaders in your business, or you're interviewing for potential junior leadership roles. What do you look for? What's the sort of defining characteristics, do you think, that make a great future leader?
I think intellectual curiosity is first and foremost a requirement. People need to want to learn, they need to want to understand how our business works, how it's going to work in the future, how it's going to change. And so I think that curiosity around why maybe we've done something in the past, or why people are thinking about things in a certain way, is really important for people that I'm going to hire. I think being a good communicator, I know I've mentioned that. Sure I'll harp on that more, but being a good communicator and willing to speak up is super important as well. And then I think the other thing I would add to that is ability to really be innovative and thoughtful about change. Wherever we are in our careers and in our various businesses and firms, I spend a lot of time doing forecasting, both for our individual assets and for our corporate strategy and our corporate finances. And while it's important to think about what's going to happen in over 3 to 5 years and work towards that, the one thing I do know is it is going to change over that 3 to 5 year period as well. And we're going to have to be responsive to that, and hopefully not just reactive, but really proactive about the changing capital markets environment or leasing environment or whatever it might be. So people who are open to change and really willing to embrace change as opposed to be resistant to that is super important, and definitely one of the characteristics I look for.
Okay. Now, I asked you earlier about, what drives you, and there are lots of different drivers. And I suspect if I asked you what drove you in the early days to what drove you today, you might give me two different answers.
Yeah.
But I wanted, again, for the benefit of our audience, are there any negative drivers? Are there anything that you think these guys should avoid or quieten? Because in your experience, this has led then to the wrong type of drive.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think if I think about what I'm driven by, I like the challenge of the work that I do. I, I like a win. I mean, I think anyone in real estate in a transaction environment likes a win. We're all deal oriented people. But the caution I would say to that is not only do you want the win, but you have to think about what's a win in the long run, and never go after a short-term win that's not also going to get you to your longer-term goals. Uh, Reputations are long, especially in this business. Your credibility is important and very difficult to reestablish if there's issues there. And as I would advise people, yes, we all want to win the deal. We all want to be able to post another closing trophy, go to another closing dinner, have all of that, good adrenaline that comes out of that. But let's always be thinking about doing it in a way that speaks to long-term success. And you occasionally see people who will, maybe not make the right decisions for a short-term win. It'll come back. I will always say it will always come back to haunt you in the long run.
Let's talk resources. Let's say, again, to anyone listening to this, what book, what sort of content, what can these guys dive into that you'd recommend that's going to help them benefit on their career journey?
I love that question. I would first say read lots and lots of things, business books, fiction, nonfiction. I think the more our perspectives are broadened through reading and listening and podcasts and so forth, the better we all will be as leaders and innovators in business. A current favorite is, of course, Adam Grant and his book Think Again. Wharton professor. Think Again talks a lot about how do you challenge your beliefs, not beliefs, but how do you challenge your perspective uh, in a certain situation, and how do you evolve as markets change, and be thoughtful about what that evolution might look like. I think that's incredibly important for anyone in business today. So I'm a big fan of his stuff. I also have a second recommendation, which is maybe
Yeah,
a little bit more fun. I not too
no
long ago
surprise, Steph,
read.
given the background here. So yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, I think they're both on the bookcase here, actually. The other book I'd recommend from a fun perspective is The Widow Clicquot, which is about the founding of the Veuve Clicquot and the woman who established that right after the French Revolution. Was really a force to be reckoned with. Her ability to think about how to sell champagne in a very difficult environment across different changing governments and regulatory environments, the innovation she did in terms of how to uh, make champagne, how to store it, how to have bottles that are shipping proof and sturdier in the shipping. Really fascinating. So that's a fun one.
Thank you very much. I will make sure I add those both to my books. So we've talked a lot about leadership. I suppose I wanted to ask a personal question. Is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Absolutely. I like what I do. I feel like I have over time become a bit of an expert in the one area that I work in, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. I get a lot of intellectual satisfaction, uh, doesn't help that, compensation's not terrible either. That's always part of it. But I think, the people I get to work with, the challenging situations that are presented, and being able to come up with a solution and sort that out. I mean, that complex problem solving is just intellectually satisfying to me. And I find it worth it. I love the people that I get to meet and work with. I hope that we get to create a good environment for people to work, feel secure in their jobs, to feel like they've got career advancement opportunities, to work with younger people in the business. I really enjoy that. That really motivates me.
I'm really glad to hear it. Now, I've spent a lot of time looking backwards, so let's turn this around a little bit and let's look forwards. What are you looking forward to on your career and also corporately? Let's go corporately first.
Corporately first. So, as you mentioned, when I joined Student Quarters in 2018, we were immediately hit with a pretty big surprise. It's felt like a lot of growth and a lot of activity in the last 6 years. And one of the challenges has been, as much as we're continuing to grow the company, grow our assets under management, grow our resources around how we operate and deliver for our investors, we sometimes, and I personally am pretty bad at this, don't take a moment to really enjoy the successes that we've had, and enjoy and look back and say, wow, this is pretty cool what we've been able to do. So I am really looking forward to being able to enjoy that a little bit more, and feel like we've hit some of these really important milestones in terms of growth of the company and stability within our portfolio. So that's really important to me. Also, as we think of corporately, 2023, we closed our first discretionary fund. That was a big deal. It's not a great fundraising environment, especially for more boutique strategies and first time fund managers. We're now at the point where we've launched our second fund. We've had our first closing there. I see this to be a really exciting time where we're changing and adding different opportunities to our toolbox in terms of how we can attract different investors, how we can deploy money for different investors. And it's going to give us, again, a lot more tools to think about how to approach the market.
What about personally?
Personally, yeah, I'll be an empty nester next year. So all of a sudden, that changes a whole lot of things. Both of my kids will be in college. And, personally, I love to travel. I love spending time going to see live music concerts of all kinds. Music is still a very important part of my life. Being able to spend more time with family, more time traveling, and more time exploring music is really important to me. And I think as I look towards the next few years personally, I'll have additional opportunity to do that. I'm also toying with getting my yoga teaching certificate, so we'll see if that happens.
Well, okay then. Well, on that really positive note, I think we need to wrap this up. You've been incredibly generous with your time, the lessons you've shared, opening up this toolkit, and I have no doubt then our audience has been able to really benefit from this. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been great to talk with you, Nick.
It really has. It really has. Thanks very much, Steph.